Hey, everyone. I guess we'll just introduce ourselves.
Sure,
quickly.
sure.
Cool. I'm Shane Wolfe. I managed then State Senator and now Congresswoman Kristen McDonald Rivet's campaign in Michigan 8.
I'm AJ. I work at a firm called Declaration Media. We did the advertising, the strategy, and a lot of the buying for Kristen McDonald Rivet's race.
And I'm Trey Nix, partners with AJ at Declaration Media.
So we put together some slides to talk about our election and how we succeeded this cycle. So just for a primer, talk a little bit about the district that we were running in. Our district is Michigan's 8th district. It had previously been represented by Congressman Dan Kildee. Before that, by his uncle, Dale Kildee. It had literally been represented by a Kildee for 50 some odd years. In the 2020 redistricting cycle, it was drawn much more competitive to, plus or minus 2 district and was tossed up all the way through the race. The district, anyone who's a Michigander, the district, if you have a mitten, the district is just right here, north of Detroit. It spans from Flint all the way north through Midland County. It's largely white non-college. 65% of the district is white non-college with a giant union presence. It's the birthplace of the UAW, put America on wheels. But interestingly, I think it's a good microcosm of the country. It has 2 plurality African-American cities in Flint and Saginaw, and a big rural farming community. So a lot of different communities and stakeholders that we needed to be communicating with. Lucky for us, the district is basically a 1-to-1 overlap in the Flint media market. It's the only media market in the district, and we're like 90% of the market itself. So that's Michigan 8. Going into the race, there were some things that we knew. We were running against a gentleman named Paul Young. Young has personal money. He had run twice before, and he had, if you look at his personal financial disclosures, he had the resources to commit $5 million this cycle. And from a very high level perspective, I'm not, I don't work for the NRCC, but if I did, he has a background that I would have found very appealing. He has a background in business. He was a prosecutor. He worked for Trump's ICE department, all things that Republicans were communicating about across the country this year.
Very, very rich.
And very, very rich, which is always nice. And so that was our opponent that we needed to be running against. And we knew from the start that we needed to be running a race in a very competitive swing toss-up district. Like I said, Cook, the whole gang, had it rated toss-up from the second we jumped into the race. With that, we came in with some priors and some principles that anchored us through the election. One, in a working class district, we were going to root our candidate, Kristen McDonald Rivet, in her working class background and bio and connect her to the people that she was seeking to serve. We were going to run a race that defined the parameters of the race not as generic Democrat or Republican, but as Kristen McDonald Rivet against Paul Young, and define terms for those 2 individual candidates, breaking partisan frameworks. And so we would be running as a different type of Democrat, and narrowly focus our messaging on things impacting people at the bottom of or at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: their safety, their money, and making cases that Kristen would be better on those than her opponent, who, while he had the seeming positives that I mentioned before, we sought to brand as an outsider and a trust fund millionaire who couldn't relate to the people of our district. So it was a challenging mission to accomplish, and lucky for us, we had an incredible media team to help us drive those narratives, and my job was to stay out of their way. So I'll let AJ and Trey talk about how exactly we did that.
All right, so AJ will go through the ads, and really this race, I'm probably the most on the buying side of our firm, and I'd like to tell you that we had a brilliant buying strategy, and that's the sole reason that she won. But really, this is a race where the message, the advertising itself, the contrast between the 2, the candidate quality, all those things were really what mattered at the end of the day. Everybody had enough money to basically get their message out. And this is not a buying story of we created a model and did 100 unique pieces of creative to, 26-year-old, unicorns. Like this is, we're really smart. This is like really, I think, a story.
That's not us.
I think this is really a story of like in a world where people are focused on innovation, we did not forget the fundamentals, things that have never changed and will never change in advertising and buying and placement. And so, we entered the race with like a pretty strong theory that the first was like that rates were going to be pretty crazy for Flint. What I tell you is fascinating about this is just, I think we had a better handle on rates in that market than really most anyone, and definitely a better handle on rates than our opponent. I would say, like, I think in today's new world order, figuring out what your cost per point is going to be in October is harder than it was 10 years ago. And it was certainly a massive moving target. Like you could get a sales rep on the phone on a Monday and think it's one thing, and literally 3 hours later have a different theory of the case. And part of that is just the number of spenders and everything else. It's very hard for them to understand what's going to happen the next day. They can wake up and have had a $4 million order placed, which in Flint, Michigan is a lot of money. And so we were really disciplined about knowing what the rates would be, and having a strong theory of the case. And the reason that mattered is because, our opponent outspent us in August, when rates were low. But we outspent him pretty significantly in October. And I think that was like our first big thing, was that we believe in late breakers. You'll hear in political conversations, there's so much clutter. There's so many people in the air in October. Like, don't you want to do more early when you have cleaner air? The problem with that theory is that people that matter don't pay attention then. So you're kind of like forced to be doing something meaningful in October, because the people that matter are finally paying attention. And so, we got outspent by 3,000 points in August, but we outspent our opponent by 4,000 points in October. I do think it is possible that the young team and others thought that rates would not get as out of hand, and that part of their issue was that they bet on a ecosystem that was never going to be there. And I think that was one of our big strengths, is we understood, we climbed it. We started at 60. We really started at $58 a point and ended at $273. And I'm talking like overnight. Like you'd place one week $71, and then like next week they'd be like, yeah, 180. And so we had a really good handle on that, and that's what allowed us to have a big play at the end. The other thing was, and this is really credit to Shane, is we stayed at parity in September. I mean, we started to build a real money advantage, but we did not use it in September. And when we got to October, we put the pedal to the metal. And in the last 14 days of the race, I mean, we unleashed a fury of spending. There was not a radio station that existed that we did not have an ad on. Literally, there were stations that told us, well, we don't do advertising, so you can't buy here. Like we were on every radio station. There was not a cable net that we did not at least have one spot on. Whether it's programmatic or Hulu or YouTube, which we had, YouTube was the cornerstone of our streaming and digital buy, and was massive. But we had a belief that at the end, the people that matter start to tune in, and we went searching for them in every part of the world that we could find them, whether it was YouTube or what have you. The other thing that struck me about this race that was important on the buying side, we've always held sports out as its own line item. They, for many of you probably know, we paid $75,000 for a Lions game in week one, $35,000 for Michigan State. A lot of campaigns, kind of, I think, see that and say, you're losing 120 points to be in that Michigan State game or be in that Lions game. Like, why would you make that trade-off? But the reality is we had so much money in news and prime fringe and everything else. Like, we didn't need any more of those people. Like, we needed the person that only turns the TV on for the Lions game and then is on Netflix the rest of the time, that's like very unreachable. And so in the last 14 days, we bought, our prime was probably 45% of our money at the end, prime and sports. It was, and that's partially because, we're still in the news like every 15 minutes, but it was a really heavy at the end towards trying to get what I call unicorns, or just very tough people to reach, people that don't consume a lot of media that's viable or that's advertisable. And so that was kind of the plan. It's not like really anything revolutionary. Just a lot of discipline to spend a lot of money at the end and not worry about getting outspent until then.
So we're going to show you some ads now. And the one thing I would say leading into these is we did a lot of fun stuff. We're really proud of these. We won the race. But Congresswoman McDonald Rivet, we can say that now, she's really, really good. And a lot of times, you'll write something on paper and you'll look at it and you'll say, boy, I think this is pretty good. And then the candidate says it, you're like, eh. She would say it, and she was just very, very good, very personable. And that came through. And that was one of the strategic objectives. Like when you talk to her, you say, boy, if everyone could just meet her the way we're talking to her, have a beer with her, whatever, they would really like her and they would vote for her. So in a lot of these, that's what we tried to do. So the first ad, we talked about working class roots. So we call this a kind of a table setter ad. So we put everything in this. So part of this is working class roots and showing that she's a different type of Democrat altogether. So let's roll that one.
Can't see it from here, but near this home's foundation sits a penny. On it, you'll find the year the house was built. I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I know this because my dad put it there. He built this place from the ground up. Dad worked construction and cleared snow all winter to make ends meet. Kind of jobs where you shower after work. Both my parents taught my sisters and me, excuses don't solve problems. Hard work will. I've carried that with me my whole life. As the executive director of Michigan Head Start, where I work to make childcare more affordable, and in the state Senate, where I'm fighting to lower drug prices and housing costs. And we passed the largest tax cut for working families in our state's history. Now I'm running for Congress to keep fighting for mid-Michigan families like the one I grew up in. I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I approve this message because I'll never forget who I'm fighting for or where
I came from.
So the other thing you'll notice about that is it's a 60-second ad and not a 30-second ad. And there was a lot of discussion earlier on because it's more expensive to run a 60 than it is a 30, obviously. And what we decided was, she's got this really compelling story. We need the time to tell it. Hopefully, if people like it, we'll be able to raise more money and tell more stories like it.
I think the other important part about that 60 and what we talked about at the time, and Trey complimented our discipline in not spending a lot of money early, but we knew that we were running against someone with a trust fund, and in his previous races, he was up on TV in June with attack ads against Mr. Kildee before in the 22 cycle, and we knew that we needed to ground Kristen and create a persona that could eschew some attacks that were inevitably going to come our way. And so spending a little bit of money on a 60 at first that might be a little stickier for people, we decided was worth it. Yeah,
we tried to really nail the contrast between, daughter of a construction worker and trust fund millionaire from California, which is pretty powerful in Michigan. So next ad that we'll show you. Okay, so we're trying to do a different kind of Democrat. The tailwinds against the National Party in Michigan were really, really tough for Democrats. Trump ended up winning the district by two or three. So we had to say she's different. So one thought was, well, we can have her talk about taxes. She's done a lot of cutting taxes. And then we thought, well, Jesus, that's really boring. So how do we make a taxes ad watchable? And we were talking to her husband, he's like, you guys should do an ad on taxes. She talks about it all the time. And that became the idea for this one.
McDonald Rivet, and I approve this message.
My wife loves talking about taxes.
I love talking about cutting taxes.
What'd I tell you?
Look, as state senator, I helped repeal the retirement tax, and we passed the largest tax cut
For working families in state history. She loves that one.
And in Congress, I'll cut your federal taxes too and make sure big corporations pay their fair share. I could talk about cutting taxes all day.
So we did have to hire a stunt guy for that. They wouldn't let Trey and I do it. They said we'd lose our insurance bond or something. So again, that was one. It also shows her, yeah, it's about taxes. Yeah, it's issue driven, but it also shows like, she's kind of a, you like her, right? And you like her husband and they've got good energy. And, a lot of people think that is lost in politics, and it's not. I actually think it's more important than ever. So that's why we did that one.
Yeah, and when no one, like, you struggle to get someone's attention on an ad, all the ads kind of blend together for the average viewer, particularly in our market where there's a presidential, a Senate, our race, like 5 other races that are trying to communicate. Like, he would go to one day into running this ad, Joseph, her husband, would go to the store and be like, "Hey, are you okay, man? Like, I saw you jump out of that car. You good?" And it was very sticky, and people remembered it. So that was worth it.
We told him we were going to light him on fire for the reelect. So the next one, kind of the same type of deal. Different kind of Democrat. She's talking about different things. We're showing her in a different light. So this one's. Roll this one, Shay.
They say politics comes down to who you want to have a beer with. So here goes. I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I'm running for Congress. My husband and I have 6 kids. I know, that's a lot. I used to run Michigan Head Start. Now in the state Senate, I'm fighting to lower drug prices and housing costs. And I helped pass the largest tax cut in state history. I root for the Lions, I hate Ohio, and I think most politicians are full. I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I approve this message. Cheers.
So funny thing about that one, we planned the whole day around this particular ad because we're not going to get the beer right, and it's going to get all over her, and then we're going to have to change wardrobe. It's going to be a whole thing. The first slide, I slid the beer, completely whiffed. I think it spilled. It didn't spill on her, but it was a disaster. The second take, grabs the beer, does the thing, nails it. I think we did one more for safety, and then we were out of there. But like I said, she's very good.
Which is good, because that would have been a lot of beer to drink. She had to down it every time.
That's right. Kitchen table issues. People were worried about. They're worried about their bills. They're worried about crime, and we wanted to show some of those issues. So this also kind of bleeds into different kind of Democrat, because you had law enforcement kind of all over the district supporting her, and that's something that doesn't happen for a lot of Democrats. So we kept touching this. I think we did 2 or 3 ads on law enforcement where we kept coming back, because we were getting portrayed as soft on crime and weak on immigration and all the things. So we wanted to keep touching that throughout the campaign, not over and over and over again, but every 4th or 5th ad, we would touch it. So we had 2 great local guys helping us out.
As sheriff, it's my job to lock up those who do wrong. And as county prosecutor, I make sure they stay there. We're both supporting Kristen McDonald Rivet for Congress. In the state Senate, she increased funding for law enforcement
to get more cops on the street.
In Congress, she's got a plan to secure our border
and to go after drug traffickers that are pushing fentanyl.
We trust Kristen McDonald Rivet to help us keep you safe.
I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I approve this message.
So we lucked out that both of those guys were just totally out of central casting and, tough law enforcement guys. Okay, so again, kitchen table issues. We tried to think of it in the most simple way. This guy's a trust fund millionaire. What does he know about you, helping you, whatever? And I think we were in a meeting or something. It may have been Shane that said, it's like, yeah, he's got a trust fund. And Chris goes, yeah, I got a value card, which we turned into a Costco card. So that became kind of a thing, Costco card versus trust fund. And that's what we did in this one.
Paul Young and I are very different. He's from California. I'm from Michigan. He wants to ban abortion. As state senator, I fought to protect abortion access. He supports tax breaks for millionaires and companies that ship jobs to China. I passed a tax cut for working families and fought to bring jobs here. Paul Young has a trust fund. I have a Costco card. I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I approve this message because I'm from Michigan. And in Congress, I'll never stop fighting for Michigan.
So that was 2 seconds of the ad holding up the Costco card, but it really kind of drove home visually what it was against. It's like, she's like me, she's going to the store, she's got a Costco card versus California trust fund guy. That's what we tried to do anyway. Okay, so we're going to show you some negatives. We're almost through these. This was kind of our table setter negative to start the campaign. So we're trying to give everybody information about it. And when we looked at our testing and our research, the issues stuff popped, but we never wanted to stray too far away from not from Michigan, has a trust fund, has run 2 times already. All of that stuff, those atmospherics, were really, really important, we found, with voters. So this one kind of set the table for the rest of the negative/contrast campaign.
Paul Young, the California trust fund millionaire who moved here to buy a seat in Congress and lost not once but twice, is running again. He's pushing the same extreme agenda: deep cuts to Social Security, tax breaks for companies that send Michigan jobs to China, and a national abortion ban without exceptions. Take the hint, Paul. Mid-Michigan voters can't be bought by a California trust fund.
I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I approve this message.
One thing about that, you see her with the cops. Even though we're not talking about law enforcement in this ad, we tried to visually just reinforce that kind of the whole way through. So that was how we set the table. The next one. So, like I said, the national wins against Democrats in Michigan were really, really, really bad. So we wanted to give people, it's an overused term, but we wanted to give them a permission structure to vote, Republicans to vote for a Democrat. And what we found was we were hearing a lot. We would drive around and you'd see a Trump sign and a McDonald Rivet sign in the yard. And we'd be like, well, that's interesting. Could we find some of these people? So that's what we did. We found a bunch of Trump voters, put them to camera. Here's what we did. And this ran, I think, in the closing weeks.
So it was 3 through 1.
Yeah.
Says things like,
Wait, sorry. Nope.
There it is.
Republican.
I'm a Trump guy,
I'm voting for Trump.
but not Paul Young.
He moved here from California to buy a seat in Congress.
Says he hasn't worked in 5 years. Just lives off his daddy's trust fund.
He wants to slash Social Security.
And give tax breaks to companies that send our jobs to China.
That's why we're all backing Kristen McDonald Rivet.
She's the real deal.
Her dad worked construction.
In the state Senate, she fought to bring costs down.
She even got us a tax cut.
I don't vote for Democrats, but I am backing Kristen McDonald Rivet for Congress.
I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I approve this message.
So we really thought that hearing stuff like, I don't vote for Democrats, but I'm voting for her, was really important for people to hear. So this is the last ad you guys will see. This was our closing negative. And what we thought of was, again, the last thing you want people to think of when they go in the voting booth, right? What is that? And for us, it wasn't any particular issue or anything. It was, this guy is not who he is portraying himself to be. So Shane went back and found every ad that Mr. Young had spoken in, and we used those words to kind of paint our side of the story. So that's what we did in this one.
says things like,
we've been left behind.
But Paul Young is a multimillionaire from California. He tells us,
I will work for you.
But Paul Young said he hasn't had to work in 5 years because of his trust fund.
One of these days I will kind of grow up and decide what I want to do.
So remember, it's not just that Paul Young is a China-backing, Social Security slashing, abortion banning extremist. It's that he's a total phony.
I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet, and I approve this message.
So subtle.
We just resulted to name calling at the end. Let's be honest.
It was a long campaign.
It's a long campaign. So that's, I think that's our presentation, right? So folks have questions or?
Yeah, I'll just quickly put a button on it.
it.
So in all, we were on TV from June 20th through the end of the election. We started single tracking. By September, we were double tracking. In the last 2 weeks, we were triple tracking. It was a mammoth amount of communications that we did, all with the goals that I described up front and that AJ and Trey brought to life in an incredible way. And sometimes when you do things, it works. So this time for us, we ended up winning by 7 points, which was a 9-point overperformance over the top of the ticket. We overperformed Senator Slotkin by 5 points. In every single precinct in the district, Congresswoman McDonald Rivet overperformed both Slotkin and Harris in every single one, which shows the broad appeal of the message that we put together. And I think the credit first and foremost goes to Kristen, who's just, they say recruit candidates who fit the district. And she does that in a very meaningful way and understands her community. And then our team put together a lot of really incredible content that demonstrated all that. And I'd be remiss to say, so like the three of us are up here right now. A lot of other people helped us put together the campaign that we did. Our deputy manager and finance director, Mariah Morgan, got us all the resources and more that we needed. She's here today and did an incredible job. Our organizing director, Kevin Hayes, had an army of people across the district knocking doors and volunteering and bringing these messages directly from neighbor to neighbor. Our pollsters at Global Strategy Group did a great job. Our mail firm ran a really complicated mail program with law enforcement and an African-American track and an abortion track that was all really compelling and effective, and that was Mission Control. So, anyway, I thought I'd brag on all of them because they all did a really good job while I can. So that's it.
Guys, thank you very much, but we have time for questions. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Megan with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I'm curious your thoughts on why you think the billionaire versus middle class message resonated for this campaign, but not as much in the presidential campaign in the same area. Do you think it was the homegrown piece?
So I think the presidential kind of stands in its just own situation and own world. And I think the presidential was much more about how you felt the direction the country was going and how you felt about your personal financial situation. I think a lot of times not just our race, you see other this playing out. Like voters have, whether it's a nuance or just like kind of a different set of standards for different offices. But, candidly, whether they elected Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, they're never meeting either of them, and that's not a big deal. This is the person who represents your community. And I think the bar to be like your community is much higher in that type of office. And, we talk about our ads and our buying and all that kind of stuff, but also Kristen was from the most conservative part of the district. Like that community knew her personally, that obviously played a critical role. But I just think that when you're running for Congress or even for Senate or governor, things like that, people's test is a lot higher for whether you pass kind of the visceral test of you're like me, you understand what my life is like, and you're here to help me. I think president is a lot more about kind of, your general sense of the direction of the country and whether you want to keep that direction or change it.
Shane, you mentioned at the beginning that you were trying to define her early to sort of inoculate her from the negatives you knew were coming. What was the nature of the negatives? And how do you feel you succeeded in inoculating her? I mean, there is a temptation as this is going on through the course of the campaign to try to answer charges, which it doesn't look like you did. But I'm curious how you would assess the success and how you knew you were succeeding in inoculating her against negative campaign.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and you guys are smarter than me, so chime in when I'm done. But you guys have all watched Republican ads from this cycle. We ran 16 ads in our race. They ran all those attacks against us. They did immigration, they did crime, they did China, they did trans, they did taxes, they did self-serving politician. At one point, they tried to say that Kristen is a millionaire to try to muddy up the waters of the fact that he's a rich guy. They tried it all. I think that our DCCC desk political advisor Nelson Devizin, who I didn't mention before but was also critical in our success, said to me in June, he's like, I'm watching these ads. We cut our first 5 all at once. He's like, I'm watching these ads and she's like Teflon, like stuff's not going to stick to her. And that's because our messages were her speaking directly to the camera and telling you what she's about. And implicitly rejecting the attacks that were coming our way. And it was able to ground her and tell people who she is. And the attacks that came our way, a lot of them were these in the studio, they all kind of felt the same. They could be about any Democrat in any part of the country with any name. It was all over the top stuff. And so the believability of our defenses, which were implicit, was just stronger than a lot of the attacks. And I'll use the transit. Steve, we talked about the trans issue when we talked a couple months ago. I think that what Republicans are trying to say about Democrats with that attack is they don't understand you. They're woke. They're out of touch. And we never took the bait and went and used any of our bandwidth, which is precious, on a direct response to that attack, we had Kristen say, I'm a mother of 6 and I'm going to protect our daughters and I'm going to keep you safe. And without saying anything specifically about that issue, we told voters what they needed to hear.
Yeah, I do think that the believability thing about the ads, obviously our last ad was way over the top, but for the most part,
but it was believable by the end because we had laid the foundation.
But we also tested some of the ads against us, and if they had tested in a way in which which we had said, oh boy, we have a problem, this puts a real dent in us, we would have responded. But we just never found one that did that. So we actually felt that we did better by responding with our positive message or going after him and saying, let me tell you why that's a false attack on A or B or C. We just got more out of it. So that was another thing. Trey mentioned discipline in the media buying. We had to do this with Congresswoman a lot. She was like, we got to respond. We got to respond right away. I was like, we don't actually. Here's why. So that was a big reason too.
And I think part of it, just watching these ads now in sequences, yes, you had a candidate who's right out of central casting. I mean, she was a Michigan mom on top to bottom. Yeah. But these were well-crafted ads. They were really well written, right to her character. I mean, whoever came up with that line, the kinds of jobs where you shower at the end of the day, that's brilliant. Somebody should get a bonus for that. That
was the problem is we'd have to give the candidate. We'd have to give the candidate the bonus.
That's a brilliant line. But it really was. There was a craftedness to all of these as well. They were really well scripted, and they were scripted to her character.
Yeah, I will say, we did try to make this race about something, about someone who was from Michigan, for Michigan, and someone who wasn't. And I do think probably our opponent did not have a very clear theory of the case against us. Like, when someone has 6 different negative arguments against someone, what they really mean, what that campaign is really saying is we have no fucking clue how to win this race. That's what that is, honestly.
It's like having 6 quarterbacks.
Yeah, if you have 6 negatives against someone, it's just you have no theory of the case. You don't know how to win the race. And that's probably our negatives on him were very focused. We didn't depart from it. We had a very strong theory. Sometimes those theories are wrong, but we had a theory of the case about what the contrast needed to be between the two, because, we do believe that if you don't make it a choice, they're going to choose the party that's moving in the right direction. And so we tried to make it a choice, Shane said at the top, between 2 people, not between 2 parties. But to do that, even with 16 ads, you really can't stray away from a theory on the negative and a theory on the positive and hope you're right.
Shane, AJ, Trey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are